Appreciate everyone's attendance. I particularly appreciate the minister coming in early, a good example to your colleagues, may I say. We have the minister has a hard stop at 4:30, and I'm going to ask her for her opening 5-minute statement, and then we will go through our usual questioning order. So with that, Minister Anand, thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your prompt attendance, and I think I speak for the committee. I particularly thank you for all of your incredible work in the past few weeks and months. Thank you again. Look forward to what you have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Standing Committee on National Defense. Je vous remercie pour cette opportunité.
Thank you for this chance to speak about the supplementary estimate C for the national defense, the armed forces, and the CST. Last month, when I was here to speak about my mandate letter commitments, I spoke to some of the efforts underway to defend Canada, protect North America, and bolster our contribution to NATO.
The past month has underscored the importance of this work and of upholding Canada's military presence across the globe. I had the opportunity to reaffirm and further discuss Canada's commitments just last week when I joined my counterparts from all 30 NATO countries during the Extraordinary Defence Ministers meeting in Brussels. In the face of our biggest challenges, we must remain engaged internationally with our allies and partners in the name of peace, security, freedom, and of course democracy, while also safeguarding our own borders and people. And we recognize that the people who serve in the Canadian Armed Forces are the most valuable and most essential element of Canada's defense. I want to thank in particular...
Minister, I apologize, but apparently there's some hissing sounds in your microphone. Not quite sure what advice to give other than maybe push it up a bit. Is it up above, at your, as they say, at your mustache line? Oh, you don't have one. Okay.
No, I was just going to say that. I hope this isn't too loud.
No, I think that's good. Is that good with everybody else?
Is it okay?
Okay. Thank you. Please continue.
Okay. What I wanted to cut in to say is the Canadian Armed Forces are the most valuable and most essential aspects of Canada's defense. And today is an important day because we actually have Canadian Armed Forces members en route to Latvia from Valcartier. And they are traveling as part of Operation Reassurance, and I want to wish them well. Votre pays vous remercie, et je...
Your country thanks you, and I thank you personally.
Armed Forces comes down to the well-being of those who serve in it. All that we do, from procurement to healthcare to culture change, must be focused on the people who put service before self, the members of our armed forces. These priorities are reflected in the $673 million we are requesting from these estimates, which is what I'm here to discuss today. Grâce à ce financement, nous allons...
Thanks to this funding, we will be able to maintain our international commitments and make new investments in our armed forces, step up our efforts to change the culture, and consolidate our digital and physical footprint across the country. I would like to speak to each one unintelligible. Our efforts on the international stage are only possible thanks to our very competent and dedicated armed forces personnel and the civilians that support them in their essential role.
In Canada and around the world, people say they want more Canadian Armed Forces. They want more Canada. This is the reality. And this is one of the reasons why we need to invest in our people. We are only as strong as the people who come forward to wear a military uniform. We know our people are at their best when we work to ensure their success and their well-being, where they are well supported throughout their entire careers, where they receive fair compensation for their work, where they feel safe, respected, and protected every single day. Simply put, our armed forces need to know that Canadians and the government have their back. Comme nous l'avons vu lors de la pandémie,
As we have learned during the COVID-19 pandemic, and as we see it regularly during the natural disasters, our armed forces are there when we need help. Therefore, we need to be there for them when they need help.
we are requesting $108 million to expand long-term disability and life insurance coverage for CAF members, $25.6 million towards the CAF's healthcare plan, $8.5 million to increase compensation for certain occupations within the CAF, such as pilots, special operations forces, search and rescue technicians, $6.7 million towards the restorative engagement portion of the DND CAF sexual misconduct class action settlement, and $4.5 million, as well as $3.8 million to address gender-based violence and expand the reach and service of the Sexual Misconduct Response Center. To touch briefly on our
Pour
maintain our much-needed presence in the world, we are requesting funding for several ongoing CAF missions, including $27 million for Operation Unifier in Ukraine, $65 million for Operation Reassurance in Eastern and Central Europe, $129 million for Operation Impact in the Middle East, and $5.6 million for peace support operations in Africa. Nous demandons également 103
we are also asking for $103 million to support the operational readiness operation for NATO. Faced with this international uncertainty, we must maintain our robust relations with our allies and our partners with similar views as ours.
No secret that our organization is facing challenges within our ranks and in our efforts to safeguard our country while remaining engaged abroad. Le financement demandé dans le
The funding asked for in this supplementary estimates C covers a wide range of priorities given these challenges.
will ensure that our people in uniform remain well positioned, well supported, and well equipped in a time of incredible change and uncertainty. Thank you. Merci, Miigwech. I look forward to your questions.
We will go to our 6-minute round. My notes say that Ms. Finley and then with Mr. Doherty. So how you divide your time is up to you. So I'll go to Ms. Finley first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll divide it half and half, basically. That's the equitable way to do it. Thank you for being here with us, Minister. We very much appreciate it. And we have a few questions. Last week, the Minister of Global Affairs said that Canadians are conveners and not a military power. Do you hold with your colleagues' view that we are not a military power, we're just conveners, and therefore military spending is not a priority?
Thank you for the question. I want to begin by thanking the Canadian Armed Forces for their historic and ongoing service to this country. The reality is that our Canadian Armed Forces have consistently stepped up to serve our country, whether it is in long-term care homes in COVID-19 or fighting forest fires and floods in Canada, assisting with the evacuation from Afghanistan, assisting with Operation Reassurance and occupying NATO's eastern flank in support of the deterrence and defensive posture of NATO. Our Canadian Armed Forces have always been there for Canada, and we must be there for them as well.
I appreciate that, Minister, and I appreciate you making those statements. It's good to hear. If this government wants to help the people of Ukraine, what is stopping Canada from buying Stingers and Javelin missiles on the open market, sending them to Ukraine? And why aren't we doing that now?
I thank you for the question. I want to be clear that we have announced 5 tranches of support for Ukraine in the military area, consisting of anti-tank weapons, rocket launchers, hand grenades, sniper rifles, ammunition, and cameras for drones. We have also, of course, trained 33,000 members of the Ukrainian Army, including 2,000 members of the Ukrainian National Guard. Your question goes to what else can we do? And I want to assure this committee and all Canadians that we are doing whatever we can to assist Ukrainian soldiers at this time, including exploring the possibility of procurements from third-party suppliers, as well as liaising with our international partners to contribute to efforts to support Ukrainian soldiers in a bilateral way. We will have more.
Sorry, I have very limited time with you. We also have surplus equipment in terms of bisons, coyotes, and T-labs. Are any steps being taken to send them to Ukraine to support the forces there, including as ambulances?
Thank you for the question. As I said, we are exploring every opportunity and possibility to provide support to Ukraine. In the case of the cameras for drones that I mentioned, we were able in a matter of 3 days to make sure we had those cameras in place for Ukraine. So the items that you mentioned in your question are important to us, and we will continue to explore them. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to my colleague, Mr. Doherty.
Thank you, Minister. If NATO engages in war with Russia, is CAF ready to respond? If so, how and to what extent?
CAF and the Canadian government is in constant communication with NATO, and we have made a series of pledges, including 3,400 Canadian Armed Forces members being at the ready in case they are called up by NATO. In fact, the frigate HMC Halifax that left Halifax on the weekend was part of the NATO contribution that Canada is making. So the answer is yes, Canada is ready to assist when called upon.
Sure, last year you failed to spend $1.2 billion. Is that correct?
Could you be more specific with regards to the item you're referencing?
You can't answer that. That's okay. Do you know that the combat system has been declared U.S. eyes only and all Canadian working on the combat system have been fired?
I am interested in your further explication of which combat system you're referring to.
And sure, do you know that all maintenance on the combat systems will be done in the United States?
I will ask my Deputy Minister if he could respond to this question.
Well, maybe Mr. Doherty could help by being specific as to what combat system he's referring to.
Minister, the government's future service combatant program has grown in costs. It's gone from $60 billion to an estimated $100 billion. Has the government given any thought to an off-the-shelf foreign purchase?
As part of Strong, Secure, Engaged, we are continuing to proceed with our planned procurements, including the procurements of 15 surface combatants. We will begin construction of the first ship in the 2024 timeframe. The anticipated delivery will be in the early 2030s. Thank you.
I'll cede my time.
Minister, if you could, we're still getting a bit of static in your microphone. May have to move it around a bit over the course of the half hour left. Mr. Fisher, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Minister, thank you very much for being here today. And I want to thank you for all that you've done on this very, very challenging file that you've been handed. I also want to thank you for coming to Halifax last week to offer an incredible send-off to the members of Canadian Armed Forces as HMCS Halifax leaves port, and your interactions with members of the families and members of the Canadian Armed Forces was nothing short of moving, so thank you for that, and it was very much appreciated by all. Minister, the supplementary estimates indicate $65.5 million for Operation Reassurance. Now, we've been hearing an awful lot about that operation recently, and in the context of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, later this afternoon, in fact, we're looking forward to meeting with Latvia's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of National Defense to hear more about our bilateral relationship and cooperation as NATO allies. Can you describe Canada's contribution, and how does this emphasize Canada's commitment to NATO?
Most definitely, Canada remains strongly committed to its partnership with NATO allies and reinforcing our support for NATO's eastern flank. Up to 915 Canadian Armed Forces members could be deployed on Operation Reassurance at any given time, making this Canada's largest international military operation involving the deployment on air, land, and sea. Elements that are so important to reinforcing NATO's eastern flank. And to strengthen NATO's deterrence and defensive efforts, we announced on February 22nd that we would expand Operation Reassurance by providing an additional 460 CAF personnel as a ceiling, along with further CAF military assets, including the Halifax that we visited on the weekend before it set sail. Shortly thereafter, the Prime Minister and I announced that we would also extend Operation Reassurance 1 year ahead of schedule for a number of additional years. What's that means for Canada? The battle group in Latvia, where Canada is the lead nation for a multinational NATO battle group, comprised of 1,500 soldiers from 10 allied nations, will continue. A battery of M777 artillery guns with forward observers and an electronic warfare group to enhance forward presence battle group in Latvia will continue. Standing naval forces continuing, a second frigate, the Halifax, that left port on Saturday, an air task force, which will Hornets, and approximately 140 which have supported NATO air policing in Romania since September. And the most recent deployment is still going to continue with a rotation scheduled for July 2022. I could go on and on. We actually have a number of additional measures on Operation Reassurance that I could describe to you, but in the interest of your questioning time, I'll cede the floor in case you have further questions for me.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I do have another question. Certainly the conversation around defense spending has shifted significantly since February when Russia commenced its aggression against Ukraine. Now, it's been pointed out many times that we live in a different world. Might be the understatement of our time. The rules-based order is under threat, and we've been studying this over the past weeks, in fact, the threats that face Canada. Where do you stand on the question of defense spending and resourcing the Canadian Armed Forces?
I will say that our government has been making critical, smart investments into our forces, and I want to ensure that you know that we are increasing spending by 70% under strong, secure, engaged between 2017 and 2026 to ensure that our CAF have the right people, equipment, training, and culture to do the difficult tasks that we ask of them. And we are actually seeing results from our procurements. In particular, 6 Arctic offshore patrol ships, 2 of which have been delivered, 1 of which, the Harry DeWolf, has circumnavigated the North American continent. We are going to be putting in place a contract for 88 new fighter jets, 15 surface combatants, 2 joint support ships, and 16 fixed-wing search and rescue aircraft. So the bottom line is we will remain focused on the Canadian Armed Forces and making sure that they have the capabilities and culture needed to meet current and emerging threats.
Fine. We seem to be continuing difficulties with the static. I don't know whether there's anybody there that can help out, but my attitude, colleagues, is just to plow on unless the translators really get.
What are you hearing? What are you hearing?
We hear static, and then every once in a while you cut out. So you.
Can I suggest,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that the minister just brings her mic up a little bit more by her mouth? That
Okay.
might help.
That might.
Don't
be
worry
a-
about interrupting me to tell me to move my mic around. I appreciate the collaboration.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, okay, let's give that a go. Madame Normandine, 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre, pour votre...
Thank you very much, Madam Minister, for being here with us. My first question has to do with Ukraine's requests for arms. They recently made requests for light arms, but Canada had reached its capacity. In order to do so, we would have to send all of our stock. However, we know that in the United States, civilians proposed sending AR-15s. These are arms that are banned in Canada, and Canada was going to buy them, purchase them. Could we perhaps use or take those weapons and send them to Ukraine instead of destroying them?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you. This is a complex issue. But firstly, I would like to say that I already committed lethal and non-lethal aid to Ukraine. The interpreter regrets, but the sound is too poor to interpret.
C'est important de continuer de appuyer l'Ukraine.
Apparently we're having additional difficulties. Have you got any suggestions? Yeah.
Okay. They're going to switch out my headset here.
Same location. They can't all stream from the same spot. They don't have enough bandwidth. So shut off their video.
Just one second.
Shut off their video, and then we can hear them.
What's that? Okay.
It's the headset.
Apparently, Minister, what I'm told, I'm getting amazing amounts of advice from people who are about as technologically proficient as I am. But what I'm told is that the connection with your colleague is actually sound. Your connection is not so sound. So if you could, for the time being, maybe borrow your colleague's connection, then that might work a bit better.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Chair. I've just switched out the headset.
Oh my goodness, that's.
Can we just
okay.
start this whole thing again?
Well, yeah. Well,
I'm
well,
sorry.
I want to be fair to Ms. Normandine because
Exactly.
she's
Bien sûr.
asked an important
Bien sûr.
question. So,
Oui.
well, I don't know why I
Au
want to start
sujet
over
de-
again, but anyways,
Okay,
if you
I'm
could
joking.
recommence your answer, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Premièrement,
Firstly, I would like to say that I have already announced lethal and non-lethal assistance for Ukraine since February, and that represents more than $100 million of military aid in both lethal and non-lethal aid for Ukraine, and we are working with our allies for support. Now, for my colleague's question, with regards to what else we can do, we are working with our partners and our allies to ensure that we can offer military and lethal and non-lethal assistance to Ukraine in future. Thank you, Madam Minister, and we can hear you a lot better. And with regards to reusing weapons that are banned with the program for 2023. And last time I asked a question on what the people from the Unifier mission were doing. They were in charge of refugees in Poland, and I would like to have an update on the role of people who are part of the Unifier mission, please. Thank you for your question. With regards to your last question, I am in direct communication with the Defense Minister for Ukraine, and we often discuss what else can be done for Ukraine, and I will continue to offer military assistance in Ukraine. With regards to your question now, our mission in Ukraine is a training mission, of course, and not a combat mission, but our forces can act if they would like to. We will continue to work with our allies, and we will help with the situation as much as possible. It's a matter of operational safety and security as well, so I cannot give you a lot of details here because we need to ensure the safety of our Canadian Armed Forces. Currently, we're talking about increasing the defense budget to upwards of 2%, but there are certain things that will take time, changing the culture in the armed forces, changing the supply system. These will take time. And Madam Minister, can you tell me something that can be done in the short term for recruitment and retention? And these are major issues right now. Thank you for this very important question. We need women in our armed forces. We need them to be able to work in a safe environment where they are protected and respected. That is why the defense team is working to change its culture to create a better work environment that is more safe for women. We are looking for different ways of reaching women and to promote the armed forces. And we want to serve them better by having more inclusive workplaces and policies. Thank you. That seems to be more of a long-term response than a short-term. Can you talk about the reforms for supply, which is another issue? Can you repeat your question, please? Certainly, if the chair will give me a little bit of extra time. So, Madam Minister, because supply is an issue with the forces, I would like to know if you are in discussion with the minister that was there before you to improve the supply system for the forces.
On supply and in particular recruitment and retention. That is a main priority of the Chief of Defense Staff and myself. And part of what we are asking for in Supplementary Estimate C today is to have funding to continue to create a diverse, modern, and agile Canadian Armed Forces. What are we going to do in the short term? We're going to be prioritizing efforts to enact meaningful culture change. We're launching a new retention strategy in 2022 to retain members, including from underrepresented groups, and we're reviewing training at every level. Those are short-term efforts that we are taking to address supply and improve recruitment and retention and reconstitution. But this is not going to be a process that is improved overnight or even within the next week. We have to maintain a consistent effort to improve recruitment, retention, and reconstitution because the forces are and one of the most important institutions in this country. And as I've said in my opening remarks, we need to do everything we can to ensure their longevity. Thank you.
And my sense is that the minister's microphone is working reasonably well at this point. Am I correct about that? Good. Madame Matheson, the final 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Just last year, the Taliban seized stockpiles of U.S. weapons after the group overthrew the Afghan government. In 2011, the Libyan civil war resulted in the spread of weapons across Africa. Some of those weapons went to terrorist groups via the black market, according to the UN. And so now, of course, with shipments of weapons going to Ukraine, some are really quite concerned and warning that parts of those shipments could end up on the black market or turned actually against the Ukrainian people if they end up in the hands of the Russian military or local paramilitary groups. There's been a lot of skeptics in Canada or of Canada's tracking of those weapons as per the Arms Trade Treaty. Can you tell this committee what measures you've put in place to guarantee the tracking of these weapons?
Well, I'll begin by saying that we are working as quickly as possible to deliver new tranches of aid to Ukraine. And as I said, 2 shipments of our lethal aid arrived prior to February 22nd. And I can confirm that millions of dollars worth of our aid has arrived in Ukraine and is making a difference on the ground as we speak. But I want to be clear, given the nature of this conflict, we are taking the security of the aid and the personnel delivering it very seriously and are unable to provide more detail for operational security reasons.
Putin threatened that if foreign national fighters, including Canadians, were captured, they would be treated as mercenaries, not legitimate prisoners of war. They would be treated, they would be charged criminally, and they wouldn't have those protections guaranteed for them under the Geneva Convention. Does your government have contingency plans for Canadians that could be that could fall into this category, and what protections or supports are you putting in place for retired or former CAF members during that fighting in Ukraine?
Okay, thank you for the question. I just want to reiterate on the last question that National Defense has signed a declaration with Ukraine's armed forces that all weapons provided will not be transferred to any other entity. And in my in-person conversation with Minister Reznikov in Kyiv before the further invasion occurred, he assured me that that would be the case. We also have had a long relationship with the Ukrainian army and have been able to work very closely with them in terms of the transfer of weapons. In terms of your question relating to the Canadian Armed Forces, I'm going to ask my Vice CDS if she would like to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Certainly, I think one of the things that we are always concerned about, as the Minister identified, is that we are working closely with our allies in ways that help them and meet their requirements and their needs moving forward. So that is one of the key components of everything that we do, from providing aid through to the work that we do with allies on a prior to the conflict time frame that we had. So certainly I would say that that is one of the key components, is making sure that the capabilities that we're delivering, the training that we provide, meets the needs of the ally that we're working with.
To the Minister, because I didn't really actually hear a response in that in terms of what supports will be put into place, especially if we're talking about former CAF members, former military members, what supports will be put in place to protect those individuals despite Putin's aggressions against and claims that they would not be protected under the Geneva Convention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Military service does place a unique demand on members and families, as your question suggests. We do have the Service Income Security Insurance Plan, which provides financial and insurance services and products to Canadian Armed Forces members and veterans and their families. And this includes life insurance, long-term disability coverage, insurance benefits, financial planning, counseling, and education services.
Sorry, Madam Minister, that's not at all what I'm asking, and I'm not sure I can repeat it again. Specifically, Putin has threatened foreign nationals with not being protected under the Geneva Convention. So it's not necessarily about those income supports or what have you. It's about if they are criminally charged, if they are taken, what supports are you giving and the government is giving to those former armed forces members who may be in that situation?
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Global Affairs Canada advises against going as mercenaries to Ukraine, and I believe the Vice CDS does have a comment that she would like to make.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Chair, for the question. I apologize for having answered the wrong part of the question that you were looking for on that last part. Certainly, I think as the Minister just stated, Global Affairs has identified for Canadians the risks that are associated with going into a conflict zone at any given point in time, not only for their own physical safety and protection, but as well for the disinformation and the ways in which foreigners who may be engaged in the country can be used in ways that are difficult and counterproductive to the work that is going on there through the disinformation campaigns that we know that Russia is very apt to use. From a Canadian Armed Forces members perspective, the CDS has sent a directive that prohibits members of the Canadian Armed Forces, Reg Force, and Reserve from being in the area at this point in time unless they are on CDS-approved military missions. So for current CAF members, they are not permitted to be in the area, even if they were to be on leave.
So if...
Because it took some time to get closer to the answer, but you may have to use some of your other time. Colleagues, I've got 10 minutes and 25 minutes worth of questions. So I'm going to, and the Minister has a hard stop at 4:30. So a lightning round, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Unless you just want me to treat this as one ongoing hour and a half of questions, and when the Minister leaves, the Minister leaves. What's your preference? Short snappers?
Just continue on.
Continue
for the full
on.
Length of the meeting.
Okay, well, then there'll be 2 questions in the second round, and then the Minister has to leave. This is, yeah. All right. I'm happy to be Ms. Gallant and Ms. O'Connell, and then the Minister will have to leave. You'll carry on your questions with the others. Okay?
Given that Canada is suffering such a severe shortage of deployable troops, and it takes years and tens of thousands of dollars to have an individual trained up to be at deployment standards, and even millions on the special forces, with Canada at its highest threat level since World War II, how much is CAF going to allocate additionally to replace the decades of experience and loyalty being cast aside in the name of mandates, which the Chief Medical Officer indicates may soon be lifted?
So there's a lot in that question, but I want to say that, as you can see from these supplementary estimates C, that what we're focusing on to a very large extent is recruitment and retention. And we do have to make sure that we are building up the CAF for the long term with ensuring the right training and the right equipment. And that's why we're focusing on recruitment. That's why we're focusing on reconstitution, because people is our priority for the forces and for me. And we're taking very serious steps to ensure mitigation and recruitment initiatives so that we can bring our forces to full strength to face the challenges of today and tomorrow. And that is important not only for domestic operations, but internationally also. And so we are very careful about what we are committing, because we need to make sure that reconstitution does occur. I'm not sure if the VCDS has anything she'd like to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, and thank you for the question. Certainly, I would say you're absolutely right in identifying that people are critical to us. And during the time of COVID, we've certainly seen a decrease.
She gave me a
in what would
fulsome
have been-
answer, so.
Thank you.
It is the member's time, and she apparently wants to move on.
Okay, given the potential to be in a hot conflict zone involving CBRMs, how much is being allocated to ensure our 3,400 troops committed to op assurance, should it become necessary, to ensure they have the personal protection gear in place?
This is a question for my officials, and I will ask Deputy Minister Matthews if he would like to respond.
We can save that for the next round then. What amount is being allocated for the pre-deployment readiness exercises for these 3,400 committed troops?
So we are committed to a range of options for NATO, a range of pledges, and the 3,400 troops are just one of those components. And they are being very well resourced in terms of their readiness. But truth be told, we are at the ready if we do receive the call from NATO to defend with our allies every inch of NATO territory under Article 5 of the Washington Treaty.
What would be the name of that exercise, the readiness exercise, to get them prepared for that deployment should it become necessary? Do we have the name of that op or exercise?
The operation is Operation Reassurance.
But
and
the exercise for readiness, what was that called? Then I can match up the amount spent.
Thank you. I couldn't give you at this point in time, although I can later, the actual name of the exercise. We have what we call the Joint Exercise and Training Account, through which we identify the costs that are associated with the readiness training that we do. And then, as you've seen through the supplementary estimates, these are the opportunities where we go back and identify that funding.
Okay,
Thank you.
What amount has been allocated towards technology to detect under-Arctic ice incursions in Canadian waters? Has any money been allocated to that?
Mr. Chair, if I could, there's nothing specific in Supplementary Estimate C to the capability that is being referenced here. And I think the member may be trying to associate detailed costing with specific activities as opposed to overall readiness and capabilities. So I suspect we may come back to this in the second part of the meeting, but I don't want to waste any more of your time, Mr. Chair.
Okay. What amount is being allocated to supplement the forces and the rangers we have in the far north around the Arctic or the Northwest Passage along our shores? Additional supplementary protection human-wise, what has been allocated for that should it become necessary?
Very briefly, if it can be answered. If not, we'll come back to it in the second round.
Mr. Chair, am I able to answer that? Or?
Okay, that's the answer. Final 5 minutes is Madame O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, thanks for being here. You spoke about in your opening speech and then throughout questioning, you spoke about the importance of people. We certainly have been hearing that testimony at committee that some of the most significant investments that Canada can make is in recruitment and in its people. So kind of two parts. Can you speak about the short term, ensuring that we are ready, as well as the medium and long term? And then one of the areas that has been brought up that a number of us have spoken about is in regards to policy changes that will actually see more diversity in hiring, in the sense, and for senior positions, because the issue around years of service before you can reach a higher rank, for example, to have more women in high-ranking positions, or in cyber, if we need specific cyber expertise now, how long does that take for that expertise or that individual to enter, to serve, and then reach the rank of the expertise that we actually need? So can you elaborate on some of that work?
Most definitely, as I have reiterated a number of times in this appearance, investing in people for the Canadian Armed Forces is extremely important to me personally as minister and to our government. It means ensuring that members of our defense team have a workplace free from misconduct and sexual harassment and discrimination, which goes directly to your question. It means ensuring that the members of the Canadian Armed Forces have the equipment they need. It means ensuring that they have financial supports. Your question was about the process of ensuring that we have diversity as we move up the ranks of the Canadian Armed Forces, and also how long will it take to ensure that we do have diversity across the board. This is an extremely important question. It is one that I take very seriously and I discuss with my Chief of Defense staff and the larger defense team on a daily basis. And Lieutenant General Allen would be best placed to elaborate on the specific efforts that the Canadian Armed Forces are taking to ensure diversity in promotions.
Thank you very much. Certainly, I think there is the point that you brought forward about needing to identify at intake so that you're starting to increase the number of women and diverse communities that we're attracting into the Canadian Armed Forces at the same time as we're looking to recover the numbers that we have is an important element from our perspective moving forward. We prioritize women applicants at the military colleges and are creating mentorship opportunities for women officer cadets as they come in. Obviously, you would also ask the question around the amount of time that it takes for people to be ready to perform the duties that they have. And that does vary depending upon the nature of the occupation and the nature of the task that they undertake.
Sorry, I don't mean
retention,
to cut you off.
I guess.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm limited
Absolutely.
time.
No, that's fine.
My question is around the policies around rank as well. And I understand the prioritization now, but if we're looking at a pool of individuals who have served a certain amount of time, it's like a time capsule in time of who actually served to get them to a place where they could exist now. And we heard testimony that there's actually other countries that remove some of the requirements for service when it's based on expertise. For example, I use the example of cyber, or to bring us to a level today of what our country looks like instead of waiting for that level of service to actually have that diversity. So are you actually looking at those sorts of policies? Sorry, I just wanted to be clear because of the limited time.
Yes, and thank you for the clarification. I would certainly say that we're not looking at a waterfall approach where we simply have to wait for generational recruitment to achieve its outcomes. We do want to be looking at opportunities, I would say, to streamline and go forward. And to that end, I would say at this point in time, we're looking at that even at the senior officer level right now. So looking down at the lieutenant colonel and colonel level and saying, knowing that there are some critical requirements moving forward for promotion. What are the critical ones and which ones aren't? So that's how I would answer it. I think the minister probably also has input that she could provide on this.
Most definitely. We do have an employment equity plan between the years of 21 and 26, which recognizes diversity and LGBTQ2+ community as a designated group. We also have a new promotion and selection process with selection boards that feature procedural improvements, including mandating that one voting member be from an employment equity group. We have ongoing recruitment efforts where we target engagement with communities across Canada to increase representation, programs to increase Indigenous representation, prioritizing women
Unfortunately,
applicants
Ms.
as well.
O'Connell is out of time. And colleagues, this is where the minister has a hard stop and needs to leave. I would propose we finish out the second round of questions and then go to the first round on the second hour. So Again, on behalf of the committee, Madam Minister, thank you for your attendance. Appreciate all the work that you do and appreciate your continuing attendance before this committee. So again, thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I just make one quick comment?
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that there was a question from Madame Normandin, my honorable colleague. When she was using the word supply, I thought she was referring to supply in terms of our people power, and she may have been referring to supply in terms of approvisionnement and procurements, and I'll take that offline with her and try to make sure I answer her question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I'm sure Madame Normandin appreciates that.
Thank
so with
you.
that, again, thank you, and we'll no doubt see you again. Okay, Madame Normandin, 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I would like to come back to Madam Minister's comments with regards to policy changes that would improve recruitment and retention. I know that there is something ongoing, but could we get more details on the general approach of this improvement to retention and recruitment?
Merci pour la question. Peut-être.
Thank you for the question. I will start, and then I will give the floor to my colleague. Firstly, we are emphasizing the health of our members to ensure that they want to stay in the armed forces. We will be launching a new strategy in the coming months as well. I will stop here and give the floor to my colleague. Thank you.
You asked about some specific policy activities that were underway, and certainly I would say targeted recruiting is one of those policies that we are looking to ensure that we are attracting in the ways at the locations of people who we are wanting to bring into the Canadian Armed Forces. Even as we take a look at basic training after we have done the recruiting, we have been moved to, I would say, a diversified basic training while we are still working within the constraints of COVID, but then hopefully when that is lifted, so that we're not doing basic training only in Saint-Jean, where it's truly our center of expertise for providing basic training, but we're doing small pockets of basic training in other locations around the country while we are looking to increase back to our steady state capability and the increase that we need to make the recovery going forward. And so this temporary, I would say, decentralized basic training is another initiative to improve the input that we have of people moving through. Retention issues and policies related to retention are as equally important, because one of your colleagues certainly did identify, it may have been yourself, Madame, who lots of money and training in them, and it's not it takes time to deliver those capabilities. And so retaining individuals is as important as attracting them in the first place. And so we are looking
We're going to have to, Ms. Normandin's time is
my
finished.
apologies.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. Ms. Masson, do you want to take another stab at your question? 2.5 minutes, please.
So you had Miss Alan, I think you had said the answer is that ultimately that if these if Canadian former soldiers go against the advice of the Canadian government, that they do not receive supports from DND or the government. Is that correct? Is that what you meant?
I reiterated that we are encouraging all former CAF members, certainly, that they should adhere to the guidance that's provided by Global Affairs, which identifies the risks to individuals of moving into conflict zones and the risks that that can arise from that.
Okay. I'll move on, I think. The minister had stated the parliamentary budget officer had been doing some tracking in terms of actual capital expenditures since 2018, and those have been underspent in the first 4 years of the Secure, Engage. Strong, secure, engaged. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the updated spending profile reveals a significant shift in those expenditures to subsequent fiscal years. And the issue that the PBO found, of course, was that if you were shifting the costs to later years, there are increased costs to equipment. There's delays in purchasing of needed equipment. There's supply chain issues which cost a lot more money. So what are the additional costs going to be incurred by D&D? Or if there aren't any additional costs, what are the long-term affordability? What will we miss out of in terms of being able to afford, or will we be able to afford less with that money?
That's an extremely important question, but she's left you 30 seconds to answer it. So it's
I'll give it a shot.
challenge.
Maybe we can take it up later. Mr. Chair, the member's quite right in terms of the PBO's analysis. It does show a sliding to the right. It's not a huge shock in the most recent year given COVID. And there is, regular inflation plus you're also seeing, inflation in defense markets are often is slightly higher. So there is an impact, no doubt. So what that means is one of two things. You have to either de-scope your project to a certain extent. So if you're going to buy 10 of item X, maybe you only buy 9. And there is, a lot of the initiatives are scalable. The other possibility is to reallocate resources if there are high priority projects where you don't want to make that decision, where you actually move money from a lesser priority project into the higher priority project. Third option, of course, is additional funding, but those are the three choices that one has.
Third option always seems to be attractive to everyone except the person who has to write the check. Mr. Motz.
Thank you, Chair. Far be it from me to help out the NDP answer or ask a question, but I'm going to take their question a little bit further. The question was asked about, or referred to basically as mercenaries. If mercenaries go over, obviously we understand from the minister's answer and your answer, Ms. Allen, that there probably will not be any supports for them. But my question is non-military, non-mercenary humanitarian efforts from Canadians who are on the ground in Ukraine. If something was to happen to them, what will the government's response be as far as supports?
I think, Mr. Chair, if you're dealing with the counsel or advice to former Armed Forces members or current Armed Forces members, that's one thing. I think if we're going to this broader subject matter, that's probably a better question for Global Affairs Canada. So possibly we can take it offline to see if we can get an answer through them and come back in writing.
Sure, thank you. We know that CF-18 is not ready, not combat ready at all. We know the studies have shown that it's not no longer a viable option in a fight. We know who the competition is basically over. The scores are in. We know who won. When is that contract going to be filled? And I know government answers it, but you guys are on the ground. Will that be filled in 2022?
So I think there's two aspects to this question. Number one, when will the results of the competition be known? That process is underway, and our colleagues at PSPC are leading that, and we'll leave it to them to announce when they are ready. But given the CF-18 will be in service for a number of years to come, there are ongoing programs and projects to upgrade the capabilities because we will be flying those planes probably for the next 8 to 10 years, and perhaps the Vice can wishes to add further clarity there. But there are ongoing programs to upgrade the capabilities of the CF-18 as a stopgap.
So who did you say, Mr. Matthews, is doing the procurement process?
The Department of Public Services Procurement Canada actually runs the procurement process, so that's in their hands to wrap that up.
It's been 6 years. Can someone light a fire under them? Like when is this going to actually come to be? I'm having a little trouble now. I don't see Miss Crosby here. Will she be in the next hour?
She's available if we need her. She's there. She's just flashed up on screen.
Thank you. As the CFO, basically for the Armed Forces arm, as I take it, because you're here for them on the finance side. My friend Mr. Doherty asked the question about the minister on the $1.2 billion that was unspent in the national defense budget last year. Can you tell me how much was lapsed and returned to the consolidated revenue fund from that $1.2 billion, please?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. I've been moving my microphone. I hope it still is sufficient. You're absolutely right. Every year, every department usually does have an amount of money that is lapsed. Last year, we did technically lapse $1.2 billion. However, we are not leaving that money on the table. It does not go into the Consolidated Revenue Fund. We are actually able to repurpose it and reprofile it and realign it to where we need it, particularly with the Capital Investment Fund that, given that we have a new model that follows an accrual process, we are able to move that money to the projects that need it when they need it. And we are also able to respend or spend a certain amount of money that's carried forward on our operating.
How much was reprofiled to later years, and in what years was it reprofiled to?
I don't have the exact figure handy now for last year, but we did reprofile primarily to this year. There was some delays experienced with COVID. Travel was reduced. We reduced the number of exercises we were doing and so forth. So our operating budget was able to be carried forward to this year. We don't usually reprofile the operating budget beyond 1 or 2 years.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can maybe add to that, of the 1.2 billion lapse last year, I think we have reprofiled 1.06, so the vast majority. And I believe it's mostly into the current year, as the CFO said.
And for what projects?
Typically, when the money lapses, it stays with the same project. There is flexibility there, but the working assumption one can use is that it would stay with the same project because things are generally sliding to the right. But there is flexibility there should be needed.
Much. Madame Lambropoulos, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our...
Emmanuel,
sorry, do you hear? Yes, is it better now?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. I was hoping to get to ask Minister Anand a couple of questions, but I'm sure that you guys are more than capable of answering my questions. So on Monday, actually, we heard from several witnesses, professors who spoke to us about Arctic security. And so my questions are more about what efforts we're currently making in order to make sure that we are ready in the north, considering that Russia is currently our biggest threat. And given the actions that it's taken in the last couple of months, one of our Professor Ferguson specifically had mentioned that there are gaps in defense in the north, and that we currently do not have good enough systems to identify hypersonics and in order to detect them. But I do know that Minister Anand plans on delivering or bringing forward a robust package that is meant to modernize the systems that are up there. I'm wondering if the technology needed in order to be able to detect these hypersonics is actually available, if it needs to be created, if companies in Canada can be put to work in order to make sure that we do get to the point where we need to be. Can you give me any information on where we stand currently and what needs to be done in order for us to be ready on that front?
So there's a lot in that question, Mr. Chair. I'll do my best, and I will then turn to my colleague, the Vice Chief, to see if she wishes to add something. First and foremost, ongoing presence is important, and there were exercises with allies up there in recent weeks. But also even events like sailing ships up in the north is important as well. In terms of the specific question around future proposals, it is in the mandate letter of the minister to bring forward a proposal to modernize NORAD and continental defense, so that I can't comment much further on that today, but that is in the mandate letter. In terms of technology, it's one of those things, there's technology now, but it's also an ever-evolving field, and the department does indeed have a research program to monitor the latest and greatest and ensure industry's engaged. But I think it's premature to comment on what type of technology would be best suited to the risk. And maybe I'll pause there and see if the Vice wishes to add anything.
Thank you very much. Certainly, I would say that physical presence everywhere in the North is certainly not, given the size and the vastness of our great Canadian North, is never going to be the approach that we're taking. But certainly one of the key elements is surveillance and having sensing capability to understand and be able to see what is happening across our country. And so certainly the investments that we have seen in the recent budget letter as it pertains to R&D moving forward, in support of NORAD modernization and our sensing is a big part of what we need to do on those first steps of making sure that we start to create an appropriate capacity to have sensing and surveillance. Obviously, with the purchase of the AOPS as well, that gives us a greater capacity to sail in Arctic offshore as well. So that there are certainly numbers of items that we need to do, but having a sensing capability and surveilling capability so that we can act appropriately in the right place at the right time, that's the best strategy for, I would say, security in the Arctic.
Okay, thank you very much. One of our witnesses also mentioned, I'm mentioning this because it's the most fresh in my mind, and I guess they made me think a little bit. One of them also suggested that we don't necessarily have a way to identify or to understand the threats that face us from a purely Canadian context in order to know how much we should be investing in defense and how much we should be meeting our, I guess, pulling our weight within NATO. I was wondering if you could maybe comment on whether you believe that we do understand to what extent we do need to be delivering and to what extent we should be investing, and whether or not this is something that you've asked. I know that you're here to discuss also what asks have been made in the budget and all of that. So if you can comment on what you think we should be spending and how much of an increase there should be.
Thank you for the question.
Seconds to answer that question.
Like anything else, our job is to develop options, and obviously we're having ongoing discussions with allies because they're also curious about what the government's plans are there, and it'll be done in collaboration with our allies. But I can't offer more in terms of what views in terms of what should be spent. But we, as always, we will work on options.
Thank you, Madame Lambropoulos. That finishes the first hour. Go to the second hour. Go to a 6-minute round. We're starting with Mr. Doherty. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Matthews, can you confirm that the future surface combatant ship designs have gone from 5,000 tons to 10,000 tons?
I think it's premature. What I would say is the initial design versus where we are now, certainly heavier. I wouldn't confirm the exact weight at this stage. Some ongoing discussions, really critical time for that project in terms of working with both the Navy to identify requirements as well as our key contractors, Irving, BAE, and Lockheed, to nail down exact requirements. And we would have a better update in months to come in terms of what the actual weight might be.
Are you aware that Irving's and Lockheed Martin have recruited British and Americans to work on the program, that Canadians need not apply?
I am aware that there's ongoing knowledge sharing between our service contractors as well as with the UK industry, and that's important because the UK launched the surface combatant equivalent ship before us. So learning from their expertise is a really important aspect in terms of delivering this project. So I think the sharing is actually a really good thing. It's not an all or nothing. It's about learning from our colleagues.
Can you tell us why the gun selected for the warship has worst reputation of jamming of any naval gun?
I would have to defer to the Navy in terms of the actual requirements that they have identified and how the bid provided by the winning bidder meets those requirements. That may be something we have to get back to you offline.
Can you tell us why the radar used is not used by any other Navy and is an orphaned system?
Again, it's a matter of matching up the requirements identified by the Royal Canadian Navy with those that were proposed by the bidder and ongoing discussions there. And I do have one of my colleagues here with me. Troy, if there's anything to add here, Troy, just come on screen. If not, I'll just carry on.
Thank you, Deputy, for the opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The radar that's been selected in the proposal by Lockheed Martin and through ISI is in development now. Modern cutting-edge technology that'll service well for the decades to come. And it's also being worked on to be incorporated into the Spanish Navy as part of their solution.
Can either of you tell us how it will keep up with a carrier battle group that travels at 30 knots when these ships can only do 27 knots?
I think, Mr. Chair, I'll go back to the initial answer that we are still nailing down exact design and requirements with our service providers, and rate and speed. We'll know more as time passes on.
Mr. Matthews, can you confirm that the combat system for those ships have been declared U.S. eyes only and all Canadians working on the combat system have been fired?
I'm certainly not aware of anyone being fired. I will turn to my colleague, Troy, to see if he wishes to add anything in terms of U.S. eyes only, et cetera.
Thank you again for the question. There's no indication of a U.S. eyes only on the Canadian portion of the solution. Undoubtedly, where there is technology transfer from the parent technology from the United States, there's elements of design there that are, I have no doubt, are within the hands of the U.S. or the U.S. Navy. But we have the access required in order to bring into service our Canadian surface combatant for our operation.
Is it true that all maintenance on the combat systems for those warships will be done in the U.S.?
No, if I may, Mr. Chair, the maintenance will be done in Canada. Some of the material will be returned to the original equipment manufacturers wherever they happen to be, whether that's in the U.S. or elsewhere, because that's where the expertise lies. But the touch labor, the ongoing labor and sustainment of our combat capability will be a Canadian domestic requirement, in fact, for the long term.
Can I ask why not the F-35?
I think on that question, we've already said what we can today in terms of government ran a competitive process. There are 2 bidders left in the running, and news will come in the following weeks ahead in terms of what the next steps are.
When will construction start on new polar icebreakers?
Polar icebreakers actually belong to the Coast Guard, so I'm not in a position to comment on when their construction might start.
In your opinion, how are we going to protect the Arctic? Do we have the capabilities for UAV surveillance?
I'm going to likely turn to the Vice in a moment on this front, but as we've already touched on, there is ongoing work to look at modernizing NORAD, continental defense, et cetera, and Arctic is obviously a big part of that. In terms of exact capability, I think it's too early to say what will be required and what will be put in place. But Vice, anything you wish to add here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the question. There are certainly, I think, a numbers of technologies that can be used to provide the surveillance that I had spoken about previously that is critical to being able to know what is happening in such a vast north such as we have. So there are many technologies. There's satellite technologies, UAV technologies. There's also obviously physical presence as a representation of ships that all can serve to provide increased understanding of activity in the north as well as a presence in the north.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Mr. Spiegelman, 6 minutes, please.
Chair, thank you very much. I've got 2 areas I'd like to ask about. One is peace and support operations, and the other is women and peace and security, roughly 3 minutes each. I hope to be able to get to both of them. Thank you for being with us today. The committee received information earlier in the first session that $5.6 million, I think, have been requested in the subs for peace and support operations in Africa. This is not an area that's in the spotlight at the moment, but I believe it's fundamentally important that we discharge our obligations. I think there's a dozen UN peacekeeping operations around the world, about half of them in Africa. And I'm wondering if you could tell the committee about our strategy for those kinds of operations. Let us know if there are any current requests from the UN to Canada that have not been answered yet, and what you see as potentially Canada's next area or mission of involvement following Operation Presence in Mali.
I will start and then turn to the Vice. Not aware of any outstanding, obviously any decision for the government to employ the CAF in a peacekeeping mission comes in concert with discussions with our colleagues at Global Affairs Canada. And Africa is an important area, and it's, we've seen evidence in the news of the changing circumstances there. Not aware of anything that's in the hopper on that front, but Vice, you may wish to chime in here.
Thank you for the question. Certainly, I think that if we're speaking about the line item that's in the supplementary estimates, that again, as was identified by the CFO when she spoke, this is sort of the snapshot of captures of costs of our previous activities moving forward. Certainly, I would say peace support operations are important from the government's perspective. Clearly, every set of circumstances, every particular military operation gets assessed as it pertains to the requirements of the UN or of the multinational organization that is providing the peacekeeping or peace support function. And obviously then the appropriate amount of action and security need to be applied to ensure that CAF members or multinational forces are able to properly execute the duties that they have to do. So where and when asked by government to consider something, the Canadian Forces puts together options for the government to consider.
Thank you very much, both of you. These $5.6 million, would they be additional costs that CAF would incur by going into a theater like Africa, or would they be costs, the proportional costs of equipment that's already ready to go, troops, CAF personnel that's ready to go, and is simply reallocated then to a mission?
Generally speaking, this cost relates to tactical airlift, so it's on an as demanded basis. So it is a little bit of if and when requested. So that's the funding that has been set aside. And there are support staff involved in that activity as well. So it is really just, I'll call it a placeholder for tactical airlift as required.
That's very helpful. Yep, that's helpful, Mr. Matthews. Thank you. This committee in the 42nd Parliament had a chance to go to Mali. We studied Canada's role in international peace operations and conflict resolution. And the committee made a number of cogent and very relevant recommendations, one of which is the following, that the Government of Canada supplement our military contributions to peace operations with support for peace processes and with support for multidimensional programs and addressing the challenges of stabilization and transition out of conflict. Just briefly, in your assessment, is it currently the case that the Canadian Forces, that the Government of Canada is adopting and following a whole-of-government approach when planning and executing obligations under UN peace operations?
Again, I will start. I think when there's deployment in these types of activities, it is never just the Canadian Armed Forces. So there are other players as well. Global Affairs has already been mentioned. Sometimes we involve colleagues at the RCMP and other departments as well. So when and as required, we certainly engage other departments and have those discussions. But every opportunity is unique. And so depending on the request that has been made and the type of mission, that may dictate who we engage with in terms of colleagues from other departments.
And would a request for a specific amount like $5.6 million be developed in coordination with the kind of international development aid that we already do that would generate peace dividends? Is there lateral coordination across to the other departments that are involved in these kinds of questions?
There is coordination to a certain extent, and this is more of a theoretical answer. So if it's largely one department who's footing the bill, we would kind of carry the can for other departments. If you're contemplating something and where you would see other departments requiring resources, there's one of two possibilities. They put in their own request, or the money effectively sits with this department and then is transferred to the other departments, when required based on the rollout of the mission. So all is possible, but the engagement is there. The funding models could vary depending upon the exact specifics.
Thank you. Thank you again. I'm not doing this justice because I only have 30 seconds left, but Lieutenant General Allen, could you give us a thumbnail update on women in peace and security and how it relates to the estimates?
Thank you for the question. Certainly, I think within the estimates itself, the $4.5 million, I think it is, if I have the figure right, that has been identified has been around gender-based violence. And so it's really been around conducting research to prevent the perpetration of sexual misconduct, response options for providing legal assistance to victims of sexual misconduct, and developing part of this money as a separate line item that you'll see in there. Not necessarily this one, is the developing the peer support models. So when we're talking about gender-based violence, which is I think the submission, if I'm answering your question correctly, sir, that is what this supplementary estimate submission relates to.
Okay, we're going to have to leave the answer there. Thank you, Mr. Spiegelman. Madame Normandine, 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Inaudible. Microphone, please.
D'approvisionnement en matière de
It takes a lot of time before we can have access to the material needed. We know that Canada doesn't have a lot of modern weaponry, and we sent a lot to Ukraine. When asked what Canada offers as support to NORAD or to NATO, we've always said that we're allies, but we need to be functional and autonomous. And when will our equipment that we sent to Ukraine be replaced?
Merci pour la question.
Your question. Firstly, National Defense gave
Spare or surplus. So most of what was provided was equipment that we felt we could do without. There are some exceptions to that, and the ammunition stocks will need to be replenished. So that work has started, and it is important to replenish those. But we were never in a position where, by donating to Ukraine, that we would be leaving the armed forces short. So it is a concern, but it's a manageable risk, is what I would say. Deuxième chose, on doit.
Secondly, we need to remember that the policy will last for 20 years, and we're 5 years into it. And as we mentioned, the process for purchasing airplanes is ongoing.
Like ships and planes, as time marches on over the coming years. But SSE, the defense policy, is indeed a 20-year policy, and we are only in year 5.
sur les avions là.
So with the planes, at OGO yesterday, we heard that we don't know when the CF-18s will be replaced. We asked questions to see how much maintenance time is needed per hour of flight. We couldn't get an answer. Could you give us an update on what's going on with the replacement of CF-18s? And does this threaten NORAD operations to not have adequate equipment? Does this place us poorly? Are we poorly placed to react?
Je dirais deux choses.
Two things. As we stated, the process is ongoing for replacing these CF-18s, and we'll be sharing information in the coming months.
So have ongoing projects to continually upgrade the CF-18, because we will be flying those planes for years to come, and it's important that they remain as modern as possible, because they will be a key asset from a NORAD perspective while we wait for the replacement planes to arrive.
Donc, mais je comprends quand même.
So we've been in this process for 6 years. It was supposed to happen soon, but we still don't have a new date for the replacement of these CF-18s, and no one can tell us how many maintenance hours it takes per flight hour. I would like to have that information. Unfortunately, I cannot share any information, but in future I will. Thank you. Now, with regards to supply, there are numerous witnesses who have told us that getting supplies from local companies can take time. And often we give these local companies contracts. And because of how slow it is using local companies, could we perhaps consider solutions that are already ready and even look internationally for these solutions?
I think I would start by saying the process to replace any type of equipment starts with requirements definition. What is it the military needs? And could we do things to speed up that process and identify options? Absolutely. You'll often hear in public discussions about speeding up procurement, and that could absolutely be done as well. There is a desire to engage Canadian industry to the extent possible because we do want economic benefits that spin out of defense procurement. I'm not aware of local suppliers being any more slow than international. The one thing I would flag for committee members, though, is this notion of off the shelf often comes up. And on big, complicated assets, it doesn't really exist. I know when one thinks of a ship or a plane, you think of the hull and the engines, or the hull and the wings, depending on what you're talking about. Where the complications arise are all the weapon systems that have to go with that, and they have to be interoperable with our allies. So a true off-the-shelf solution rarely exists. Where it exists, absolutely, you can look at it, and it would certainly speed things up.
Madame Nathison, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you to the witnesses. During Mr. Doherty's question time, I believe, Mr. Matthews, you said that we would know about the fighter jets in a matter of weeks. Just now with Madame Normandin, you said months. I know that, and she had referenced as well, Government Operations Committee, they said by the end of the year. Now, weeks and months are by the end of the year. But if you could actually clarify what you meant, is it actually weeks when you say weeks?
Thank you for the question. Weeks do turn into months pretty quickly, and it is a process that is being run by the Department of Public Services Procurement Canada. So whether we're into weeks or slipping into a month or two, I can't really comment at this stage. The process will be done when it is done. And they'll be updating with the next steps at that point. So,
okay.
I can't really be more precise at this stage. I apologize.
Okay. In my previous question that I didn't have a ton of time for, we were talking about the PBO and in terms of those increased costs potentially to equipment. Now, you had mentioned that, of course, that delay in the purchasing of equipment or what have you would absolutely work potentially against us in terms of the scalability of a project or whatever. Now, were you talking about that in theory, or has that actually happened? And if so, where has it happened?
Hasn't happened yet that I'm aware of on any projects, but I will ask my colleague Troy to correct me if I've got that wrong. But it's more of a theoretical concern that will eventually begin to impact some of the projects that come online. And inflation is real, and so as items move to the right, you will see some erosion there, and then there's choices to be made. But Troy, is there any example? Troy is shaking his head that there's no real examples yet. So at this stage, it's a theoretical discussion.
Okay, and in terms of that theory, though, what type of scale, what would the percentage of that scalability be? I mean, I know that you kind of give an example of buying 9 versus 10, but if you could give something more specific, I would appreciate that expansion.
It's a difficult one in a theoretical environment because you could look at just less trucks. That's an easy one, or you could look at having the same number of trucks but less capability, and that's a trade-off that my colleague the Vice may offer something here, but that's a trade-off that would only be made with the direction of the experts who understand what the requirements truly are. And when you're into Army projects versus Navy projects versus Air Force, the Army projects tend to be I would say a little more simple in general, and you've got more things to play with. If you're looking at a plane or a ship, it's not a decision to go down by less ships or less planes. So the Army projects are probably more easy examples to get your heads around. But I'll turn to the Vice to see if she wants to offer anything here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the question. I would just, I guess, add on to the Deputy Minister's point that certainly I think when we take a look at what we believe we're going to need to deliver our capabilities in the investment plan, there sometimes comes the occasion where the requirements that you identified would be good to have or that you would like to have may not be available at a given point in time. They are desirable qualities that you'd like to have, but perhaps aren't available. And so sometimes you will then end up scoping down the size and the cost that's needed to deliver a project because you have actually settled on a different set of requirements than you may have initially in the very early stages had. So I just wanted to provide that potentially as an example of in the early stages of project before definition and implementation, where there may be opportunities that there's actually some scaling with respect to cost and cost requirements for particular projects.
Certainly, we would all understand, scaling back in terms of the numbers. In terms of that operability or that capability, my concern, of course, would be in terms of what our incredible men and women in the armed forces can do with that and their health and safety. So could you speak to, when you're talking about that scaling back, what that means for the actual work of the Canadian Armed Forces?
Well, thank you for the question. So certainly as we are defining the requirements for capabilities, we work on a system where we have high-level mandatory requirements, and those are the mandatory elements of the project that need to be delivered for the capability to be useful to deliver for the members of the Canadian Armed Forces and for our outcomes. Those aren't the types of elements that we are talking about compromising on. It might be around additional elements that would make it even more versatile potentially, but those that is where the scalability and therefore the potential for cost adjustment can come in.
Completes our 6-minute round. Colleagues, again, I'm in the same position, which is 15 minutes and 25 minutes worth of questions. And we have the Deputy Prime Minister of Latvia coming, and that's going to require us to go in camera. And as you know, that's a bit of a process in a hybrid committee setting. So I'm going to be a little bit, I'm going to be my usual arbitrary self and go 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, and that'll take us close to the end, and then we'll go from there. What's that? Faster what? Well, the problem with full minutes is that it'll take me to 5:45, and we'll cut off the time.
We just use 4 minutes up in this intervention.
Yeah. I appreciate all of the assistance that I'm getting to chair this meeting, but we are going 2 minutes. Mr. Motz, 2 minutes. Okay.
So this is for the Vice CDS. If she could finish replying to the questions that we asked, first one being the amount of money allocated to our 3,400 potential troops that would be deployed to op assurance should it become necessary. What amount is being set aside for CBRN equipment, protection, personal?
Thank you for the question, but I'd like to clarify just to make sure that I understand it correctly. Were you wanting to know about the preparation of the personnel who might be called upon to go augment in NATO, or about CBRN training and protection in general?
Aside for the protection, and how much has been set aside for the training of those troops to go to op assurance, if need be.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. So certainly, I think as we take a look at the type of environment in which any military capability is going to be entering into, we do a threat assessment of the environment and make an assessment of whether what we think the CBRN requirements may be in that environment, and then make those adjustments and add that into the training if we believe that's a necessary a step for us to take. Obviously, on fairly routine.
That's great. I get the idea now. So now back to our troops. Some of them, over 20-year veterans who've been cast aside because they didn't get all their jobs. What amount's being set aside to replace them, or is it a cost savings exercise? It's less less expensive to pay brand new recruits than somebody who has been there 20 years plus a potential pension if they go all the way to 25?
So the Canadian Forces certainly has the funds set aside to have us at our manning level. So there's no additional funding that needs to be set aside as we're bringing in new recruits into the Canadian Forces.
Okay, and what amount is being set aside for Stratcom for?
Thank you, Ms. Gallant. You'll have to get that answer at some other point. Mr. Fisher, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I just want to begin by responding to a comment made by Mr. Doherty earlier on when he talked about Irving shipbuilding and Canadians need not apply. Mr. Chair, that is an incredible disservice to the thousands of Canadian shipbuilders building our warships every day. Thousands of Atlantic Canadian shipbuilders, many from my riding of Dartmouth Coal Harbour. We should be extremely proud of those shipbuilders. I, for one, am. If I could get the Vice to just elaborate on the challenges associated with major capital expenditures. You talked about COVID. COVID is an excellent reasoning for perhaps the inability to spend that money, but what factors challenge the ability to spend on large capital projects as planned?
Thank you for that question. Certainly, I think there are many challenges and diverse challenges that can arise, and those types of things I think are probably seen by our implementers, be it on the information management, the infrastructure, or the material side of the house. And so it's possible that Mr. Crosby has additional information that he could provide to you on the types of challenges that he sees on capital expenditures.
Mr. Chair, quickly, I would bring COVID, of course, to the conversation, but as well, we do have challenges with industry's capacity at times to move programs forward. And as was mentioned earlier, the technical challenges, the integration challenges of some of the very sophisticated technology that we're seeking to deliver does come with its own problems that we have to work through. And the spend, of course, is the outcome of the delivery of this equipment. So when we run into difficulties, us and industry, then we see that manifest as delays in the project and money being moved forward into future years where it's required.
Madame Normandin, a minute.
C'est court, 1 minute. Rapidement, L3.
Alors, L3, since the drones is something we'll be referring to, L3 is a Quebec company that was ready to work in cooperation with other companies to make our operating systems for drones entirely Canadian, but the government seems to want to prioritize a California solution. I'd like to know if Quebec companies are still in the running. I will ask Mr. Crosby to answer that question.
The question, L3 remains one of the two qualified suppliers in the competitive process for the remotely piloted aircraft system.
I hope that's happy. Makes you happy. Madame Matheson, 1 minute.
Of course, we've heard so many increasing reports of extremism, incidents of racism, continuous reports of sexual misconduct amongst the CAF, and the leadership being charged. Many people within have asked for a fuller picture. They've asked for each of the branches to develop annual reports to give a sense and scope of the problem. I would imagine this would be for Mr. Matthews in terms of a direction that the government would be willing to go in.
Lots of discussion about how to best tackle this, mostly around culture change. Reporting is part of it. How far down you push the reporting, I think, is a live question. And maybe I'll turn to the Vice because she has more history on this issue than I do. But I'm not sure pushing down detailed reporting at every level would be on my list of the best ideas. But there are others with differing views, and that's fine. But Vice, you may wish to add here.
So I think we've all agreed that
question. With that, I'm going to turn to Mr. Motz for 2 minutes, or Ms. Gallant for 2 minutes.
Ask a question about Stratcom. How much has been allocated to Stratcom?
I'm afraid I didn't hear your question, ma'am.
How much has been allocated to Stratcom?
From the The annual budget, ma'am, or the?
From the annual budget. How much is going
I would probably have to ask. I would probably have to ask our chief of financial officer, sort of the allocation of funding for our public affairs branch. If that is would be a satisfactory answer to you, we may need to get back to you on that.
So, given the situation, are we giving anything extra? Even if you don't tell me whether or not, or how much we are actually giving, is it going to be more as a consequence of the situation that's arisen in Ukraine?
I think maybe what we can do, Mr. Chair, if it's agreeable, is come back with a written response in terms of budget current year versus budget past year. Just
And
to give us
Op Unifier, has any additional money being allocated to Op Unifier should we be able to re-engage in that way, given the situation?
So maybe I'll start on that. Unifier was very much focused on training, but there was a donation piece. The donation piece has actually been accelerated, while the training piece, for obvious reasons, has been put on hold. Not sure there's more I can add at this stage, but as events unfold, the government can always look at its posture, and decisions can be taken at a
okay.
future
Mr.
time.
Motz can finish up.
Okay. Well, I guess what I'll do is I'll make a statement then. And Mr. Matthews, just maybe directed to you based on my question from before about procurement. We know that to date, we haven't even been able to procure a new sidearm for the Canadian Army. And yet we are still, I think we look a little foolish, quite honestly, that we can't procure a pistol, and yet we're still fighting about, we need new fighter jets, we need new surface warships, we need new submarines, new icebreakers and drones. Where's the breakdown? Like, what's going on that the procurement is struggling so dramatically, and it's affecting our readiness for our armed forces?
Question turned into a statement
points.
turned into a question, and you ran through your time. So I'm sure that Mr.
Can I
Matthews
respond to that, Mr. Chair, or is it?
You can respond in response to Ms. O'Connell's final 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, but my question is actually around the Middle East strategy and in supplementary estimates and CSE's contribution. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate on what this specific investment in supplemental estimates, what that looks like. Sorry, it's an additional $4 million, but what that additional $4 million is for.
Thank you very much for the question. CSE has a mandate to collect foreign intelligence and also a long track record of supporting military operations with CAF. So that money has been dedicated to analytic resources to produce intelligence that can help Government of Canada decision makers use foreign intelligence to inform their policies, but also to help CAF with their operation impact objectives and to provide force protection for the forces that are deployed.
Thank you. Without going into operational details, but is some of that additional money additional personnel or equipment base or a mixture of both? Again, without getting into the obvious protected information around that, but I'm just curious, are we hiring more analysts or is it equipment upgrades, et cetera?
It's predominantly based on the analytic resources that would be required to do that work. So people.
Thank you.
And I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to ask Deputy Minister Matthews to respond to Mr. Motz's question, only because of my great appreciation of Mr. Motz and his contribution to this committee.
That's fair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly on pistols, I wanted to flag for the committee that this is a great example of where the requirements that were initially laid out by National Defence through PSPC were so specific that a competitor said, this is not a fair and open competition because you've effectively made them so narrow we can't compete. So they appropriately challenged it at the CITT, back to the drawing board. Frankly, we were able to turn the request for proposal around very quickly and get it back out. But it's an example of where if one is too specific with its requirements, you actually limit competition and effectively maybe limit the solution. And I think there's valuable lessons in there for all of us.
Thank you, Minister Matthews and General Allen. I appreciate your contribution here to the study of the supplements. Colleagues, there's no vote required because it was deemed reported on Monday, so we won't have to go through the usual votes of 1 and 5. Our friends from Latvia have just arrived. With this hybrid form of parliament, we're required to adjourn and then to come back in. So with that, this meeting is adjourned, and we will re-empanel as soon as we are back online. So thank you again. Meeting adjourned.